But we are starting with Michigan and a closer look at how Governor Whitmer set the tone for what she plans to work on for the next 4 years.
Another recent study found that Michigan had the worst roads in the country. The worst. Now let's be honest. None of us needs a study to tell us how bad our roads are. The evidence is impossible to ignore. No one will invest in a state that doesn't invest in itself. That's the hard truth. And let's be very clear. Incremental fund shifts, like we've seen in recent years, they just won't fix the problem. And to my friends in the legislature, when you're back home in your districts, talk to your local leaders and start to prioritize so that we can make sure when we come back and we pass a budget, we get to work on the things that are most meaningful to the people that you represent. Let's get it done and let's fix the damn roads. Our educators and our kids deserve our support, not a funding crisis that undermines the work of the classroom, that weakens our schools and compromises the education. We know that potential is everywhere. Potential is universal, but right now opportunity is not. Our students are not broken. Our teachers are not broken. It's our system that has been broken. And while we can't fix it overnight, and greater investment alone won't be enough, we are going to do it because 2 million kids in Michigan are counting on us. For too long, our government has been plagued by a lack of transparency, and we have consistently ranked the worst in the country. We in this room have the power to fix that. Let's expand FOIA to my office and to yours. If we want Michigan to be a home for opportunity, it should be opportunity for all in all workplaces. We need to expand Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act to include protections for the LGBTQ community. The My Opportunity Scholarship will guarantee 2 years of debt-free community college for all graduating high school students who qualify. Next month, I will present a budget, and my budget will offer a real solution for fixing our roads and rebuilding our infrastructure. It will give frontline educators the tools they need to address the literacy crisis. And most of all, it will reflect my unwavering commitment to making Michigan the home for opportunity.
And this is the key, the budget. She also made a point to say she's not signing any budget gimmicks that extend the problem. And speaking of budget, she wants to keep with Governor Snyder's example of getting it done before summer break. All right, let's get into it with Nolan Finley and Stephen Henderson. It is good to see both of you guys and discuss a little politics here. All right, I think I've gotten over wanting a lot of details in the State of the State address. It didn't really bother me. Well, it's not like Governor Snyder gave a lot of numbers out at his State of the State addresses. But I think she set a tone, which was what she is going to be about for the next 4 years. And starting off the top with roads and education, I think sent a signal, Nolan.
Well, it's no different than her campaign. I mean, I don't think it was unexpected. She's been talking about roads and talking about education. This was a particularly skimpy speech, I think. On roads, she didn't even give us a hint of where she might be going. This is going to be a serious issue. She's going to have to sell, and it's going to take a tax hike somewhere. And I thought that would have been a good place to start preparing the public for the fact that we're all going to have to pay for fixing these roads.
I think, but she did talk about that we all have to give some kind of investment because we all agree in the sense that everything is crumbling in terms of bridges, roads, infrastructure.
Yeah. So you know, in the last 8 years, we actually did become accustomed to the governor giving a little more detail than past governors had at State of the State, right? Snyder often would talk specifically about things he wanted the legislature to do in the State of the State, and Granholm didn't do that. Engler didn't really do that. It's not the way the speech had been sort of configured before. So in a way, Whitmer's first speech is a throwback, I guess, to the times before, and that she didn't give very specific things that she wanted the legislature to do. I think she could have come out and said, Here's where I think we should be headed to try to get road funding. Instead of just sort of hinting at the idea of people sacrificing. I mean, you're talking about $2 billion a year we need to raise to actually deal with the problem. And she was very eloquent in saying we need to deal with the problem and not kick the can down the road, not go for quick fixes. I think she should have been honest about that. We need $2 billion more dollars. Here's where I think
Yeah, but
we
you
might
saw,
find
on the
you
people
saw
who are sitting in
Republicans
front
sitting
of
on their
us.
hands. And so that's the whole thing. If you need $2 billion, Nolan, where is it going to come from? And what kind of help is she
Well,
going to
there's-
get from the people who are not
Well,
applauding that?
you heard Mike Shirkey come out this week and say, you know, it'll probably will take a tax hike, and it will. The question is where you get it, and then where else what other priorities then can you handle if you're going to be raising a significant tax for roads? Can you then also raise a tax for education? One of the ideas we thought she was going to put on the table Tuesday night was using that 6% sales tax that's on gasoline for roads. That's what most other states do. That's why they have more money per capita to spend
But a lot
on
of that money
roads.
goes to
But now
schools
that
here.
money goes to schools and revenue sharing. So if you take that money, how do you replace it? She had a lot of things she wants to do in that speech, a lot of areas she wants to target, but it's all going to take money. So which ones will get funded and which ones won't?
And it's a daunting task when you have two major things when you talk about infrastructure and education. And we've talked a lot about how much money we should be infusing in education. And it doesn't just take money. It might take some shifting of how we spend certain funds.
Sure.
But you can't argue with the fact that the per pupil funding has been cut and we are lagging from other states around in the Midwest, if not the country. She's got two major things to deal with here to try to squeeze some cash from.
Yeah, I think the community college idea is huge from a policy standpoint. It's the kind of thing we should be doing to make sure that everybody needs something more than a high school diploma, no matter what it is you're going to go do. And community college often is the way you get that. But to guarantee free community college, you're talking about a very big price tag on that. At the same time that we, as you point out, have to be making up for all the money that we haven't been putting into K-12. I mean, we've been sliding down the national ladder on that as well. So now you're talking about even more money, right? And another very big ticket item. I worry that there's not going to be the appetite to raise that kind of money all at once. So where do you get it?
And that, Tennessee did the community college thing, and it's working. It's drawing people to the state, keeping people in the state. But before they got to that point, they addressed their K-12 issues.
Right.
They reformed K-12 education. She leapfrogs over the problem here. We've got very serious structural issues in K-12 education. We have these free community college programs in Detroit. We've got 2 years at the Detroit Regional
Detroit
Chamber.
Promise.
5,000 kids are eligible. 500 of them actually took advantage of the program, and half of those didn't make it to the second year. So that's a sound
K-12
good
reflection,
program, but it doesn't meet the serious challenge. And she's going to have some trouble doing the hard things she needs to do to fix K-12 because she is so beholden to the education unions. And so she's not only going to have to fight the Republicans in the legislature, she's going to have to fight the education unions who helped put her where she is.
I think it's going to be interesting to see, and Stephen, give me a little bit of insight into the legislature. We have a lot of new members in the House and in the Senate, and what is their appetite for maybe being able to, find that money or vote for some kind of tax, or what are you getting the sense of so far?
So
because obviously she's putting her toe in the water. She's been talking to people over the last month. It's not like she hasn't done any kind of setting the groundwork before she comes out with her budget on this.
No, I think that's right. It's huge that Shirkey came out and said, we may need new revenue. I mean, that's a sea change in the way that the leadership in the GOP leadership in the legislature has talked about this issue for the last 8 years. I mean, they have said no new taxes for any reason under any context, and that has been their strongest, the strongest pillar of their policy platform. And so for him to say, maybe we'll think about that, sort of acknowledges the awful situation we're in, and that maybe they have to think differently. The House is a totally different animal. Lee Chatfield is much more dug in generally ideologically than Mike Shirkey. The conversation that I had with him a few weeks ago led me to believe that he's not going to be very easy to move on that question of new revenue. But if you get the governor and the Senate on one position, that puts a little more pressure on the House, where you've got again, a lot of new members in both chambers. Which side do they choose, I guess, is the question.
What do you think, Nolan?
I think we've got better leadership in the legislature than we've had in a long time. I've been impressed with Lee Chatfield and his willingness to consider ideas and consider new positions. I don't think you can expect Republican lawmakers, and you shouldn't, to say, okay, let's just open the door and we're going to put a tax on everything. It wouldn't be good for the state, wouldn't be good for the people of the state. They've got to pick and choose where they can raise taxes to do the most good. I think roads is a clear area where you're going to have to raise user fees and taxes to get there, because we've neglected them so long. I'm not sure you're going to get a whole lot of new taxes for schools, but there are things you can do differently with the school funding to make sure more of it gets to the classroom, because we are still a top 10 in terms of funding in the nation, in terms of education
we're like
funding.
15 now.
We're ninth, I think.
I mean, we're sliding down. And when in real dollars, when you think of how much we've taken out of K-12 and how much other states have
But
put into it.
that's disingenuous too, Steve, because some of that money that was taken out of the foundation grant, Snyder used to pay
retirement.
down debt and forgive districts from that obligation.
I get
so
it.
the hit to their bottom line has not been that great.
Yeah, but you
if
still
look
need
at-
funding for books. You still need funding
You
for
do.
counselors. You still need
You
funding for
do.
wraparound
So
services
here's
that
the-
come with
But
here's the
we
education.
could do a
problem.
lot to stretch our education dollars further. We've got
We could do some.
500 plus school districts
So
in this state.
here's the thing that frustrates
Last
me
word on this.
about schools is when we talk about it, we don't say let's be like the top states, right? You know how much they spend per student in Massachusetts compared to Michigan? You know how much they spend per student in Maryland compared to Michigan? It's embarrassing. We are like a backwater compared to those states. We ought to start there and talk about how we get to that, because their outcomes are what we want. And it's not as though there aren't other considerations about how you spend the money, how you hold people accountable for things. We got to do that too. But you start with
You've
the
got to
dollars.
get results from the money, and
Okay.
there's no guarantee the current system will produce
Can't
results.
get results from no money.
Well,
Well,
and
we're
there's
far
also
from
going to have
having
to be
no
some
money. We're-
systemic changes in what we're doing in the classrooms and how some things are put together.